Welcome to Cult and Classic.
Welcome, friends and fiends of the pod, to another episode of Cult and Classic Podcast, where we pair a mainstream film with a thematically linked, lesser-known cult film and discuss them. This is our Thanksgiving episode. Gobble it up. This is exciting. I'm a big fan of Thanksgiving-themed movies, of which there are a handful, and I picked two of my favorites for this chat. With us, as always, is me, your host, comedian and film critic for HorrorNews.net, Nate Wyckoff. We also have with us Tad Mastroianni. How are you doing, Tad?
I'm back, baby.
You are back. Can you turn your mic down a bit? You're not that back. Jeff Tucker. How are you doing, Jeff?
Good. Turkey.
Yeah, turkey. And then Greg Johnson. How are you doing, friend?
Well, I was with you until you made that gobble up pun, and now I'm just kind of out.
Gobble. I met someone once who, I don't remember what college they went to, but it was like the Fighting Turkeys or something. And like when somebody mentioned the name, he slammed his fist against his hand and wiggled his fingers like a tail and go. It ruined Thanksgiving. Yeah, so I'm excited. Our first movie is 1993's ADDAMS Family Values. This is a classic film. Christina Ricci, Raul Julia, Angelica Houston, Joan Cusack, Christopher Lloyd, Carol Kane. I mean, it's iconic. And then we'll be moving on to the lesser-known 2009 THANKSKILLING, which is about a killer turkey. And I'm really, really, really excited to talk about this movie, so we're going to dive right in. ADDAMS Family Values. This is the 93 sequel to the ADDAMS Family live-action reboot film series of the time, based on Charles Addams' cartoon characters, the Addams Family. It was written by Paul Rudnick, and it was directed by Barry Sonnenfeld. I think this is probably Barry Sonnenfeld's, if not his best, one of his best films. Paul Rudnick is an experienced writer. He wrote the 2004 Stepford Wives. He wrote Sister Act. He wrote a lot, especially in the 90s. The movie is, or the plot is that Angelica Houston, Raul Julia, Morticia, and Gomez, thank you, are having another baby. They already have two children, if you're not familiar. And if you're not familiar, I'm not sure how you're not familiar. But they have Wednesday Addams, who is the oldest, the daughter. And then they have Pugsley, who is the younger brother. And the new baby, who they named Pubert, looks like a little Gomez. He has a little pencil mustache and the slicked hair and the pale face. And he's an actual baby. Well, the kids want to get rid of the baby. Christopher Lloyd, of course, masterfully plays Uncle Fester, the heavy, rotund, no neck, crazy, weird, white-faced ghoul who's Gomez's beloved brother. Lurch, the big Frankenstein-esque doorman who doesn't speak. There's Thing, the hand that just runs around. There's Cousin It, who's just a big mound of hair. All the characters make an appearance. With the baby, the central problem is that they get a nanny. And the nanny is played by serial killer, well, she's not a serial killer. She plays a serial killer, Joan Cusack, who is super great in this role. And I think kind of a standout among standouts. Like, she gets perhaps the most screen time of anyone. She's a gold digger who pretends to be a caring maid when in fact she's trying to seduce and marry and then kill Uncle Fester for the Addams family fortune. She does marry him, and then she separates him from his family because she can't seem to kill him. And then, of course, the tables turn. Accidentally, she is killed, and the group lives happily ever after with new baby Pubert. Did I miss anything?
I think that about covers it.
I probably missed a lot, but this is one of those movies where it is, in the theater especially, it's fantastic to watch because the set pieces are impressive. Every single scene is a spectacle set piece. Nothing is normal. There's one scene in a normal place in this movie, and it's a very short scene where Gomez and family goes to the police station, and there's a cameo by Nathan Lane as the policeman at the desk. who essentially tells him to get lost because, oh, boo-hoo, your brother got married to a woman who, you know, made him a sexual slave. Boo-hoo. I liked this movie. I always have liked this movie. I watched it again after having not watched it for probably, you know, 5-6 years. It was better than I remembered it for me. I was really entertained throughout the whole thing, and most of it holds up pretty well, I thought. Jeff, what was your experience with Addams Family Values and your take on it this go around?
You know, I actually had like some kind of like general remembrances of this film. I had no idea why it was a Thanksgiving film, like why we were watching it this week. And, you know, until I watched it, that completely went. But like the two kind of main premises of the film stuck with me. And I think the one weakness is maybe like the plot overruns the family a little bit. In this film, you have the, you know, what if a real serial killer meets these, you know, kind of cartoon monsters, you know, like a real monster meets cartoon monsters. It's a really cool, neat premise.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, Joan Cusack just kills it. Like she's like,
Yeah.
you know, she plays like a really good, you know, crazy. And then you have the two kids in like a really positive, nice, like it really is like, it's really like Wednesday's nightmare.
Yeah, they
scenario.
get shipped off to the rich kids camp, summer camp,
Yeah,
because Joan Cusack's character is trying to get rid of them. So she convinces Gomez and Morticia that they actually want to go, which they think is dreadful, but they do it because they want to do what their kids want to do.
Yeah, which is like, you know, they're singing Kumbaya. It's like
it's Camp Chippewa, which is interesting because you know, we're used to, at least until recently, I wouldn't be surprised if many camps are actually changing their Native American inspired names in response to the plight of people of color. But in this case, Chippewa is actually a tribe, although it's sort of problematic in of itself because they're not the Chippewa tribe, they're the Ojibwa tribe, which I'm probably pronouncing wrong anyway, but white people just couldn't seem to wrap their head around a name that started with an O and had a J and a B in it. So they pronounced it Chippewa, which is sort of a monstrosity in of itself. But yeah, that is true. And I will say, I certainly didn't mind it, especially as it's a sequel and we've presumably had the family dynamic set up from the first film. But I will say that I think what you're getting at is that, yeah, especially Joan Cusack's role, and it's Debbie is the character's name, the Black Widow, you know, who kills her husbands on their wedding night. She, like I said, she gets probably the most screen time. She really is front and center, and she does a great job. Of course, if anyone who can't picture Joan Cusack, you know, she's very pretty. She's brothers with High Fidelity Cusack. Why am I blanking on his name?
John Cusack.
John Cusack. Thank you. Joan and John. They're super different. I certainly can't remember that. But it was interesting because she has, you know, a push-up bra and she's very beautiful in this, but they give her, I don't know if they did an applique of some kind over her teeth to make them look a little rotten, or if it's actually flippers, like a cover on her teeth, but it gives her an extra slur in her mouth because she has sort of a slurry voice anyway. She voices Jessie in Toy Story. You know, she has a very recognizable voice, but they give it that extra oomph for this character by having that slightly thick veneer. And it's kind of a cool visual cue too, because she presents herself as such a perfect, sweet, overbearingly, you know, nice, perfect nanny, but the inside of her is actually gross and weird. And so that was a cool little visual cue. Tad, what was your memory of this film and what was your experience watching it again?
My memory of this film was entirely the trailer because I never actually went to see it. I remember watching the original years ago and sort of enjoying it, but you know, it was between this and Edward Scissorhands for me in terms of the weird gothic horror sort of vibe and the additional comedy. This is, to me, is the Ace Ventura 2. Honestly, for me, this is a movie that has a lot of memorable jokes, and some of them actually really landed well. Like Christopher Lloyd did a great job, even though I'm not really a huge fan of the Fester character.
100% into the role. Like
Yeah.
I mean, we all know him as a skinny, scrawny doc in, you know, Back to the Future, but in this role, I mean, whatever sort of funky shoulder padded suit they have him in, I mean, he just devours the scenes, and it's brilliant.
It's the way I looked at it is it kind of gave me that vibe that I had when I saw Ace Ventura 2 for the first time. It's such a different movie. It just has it's all about getting the jokes in and a lot less about the actual plot, because mostly way through the movie I was like, did it matter if anyone had this baby? Because I'm pretty sure the baby is literally just a comedic device and actually has no bearing on the plot whatsoever, except to introduce the nanny, which then doesn't nanny throughout most of the movie anyway. By the way, Joan Cusack, she looked absolutely gorgeous in this movie, which was interesting to me because I grew up with Joan Cusack basically playing a lot of like plain characters.
Yeah, she's always the best friend or the dorky aunt.
Yeah, and they turned her into a bombshell for this movie.
Yeah, and I think that's notable, because it's funny, if you look at John Cusack and Joe Cusack together, you can tell they're related, and you would never think that any feature on John Cusack's face could translate into a beautiful woman, but I think she looks stunning in this film. Greg, what was your remembrance of this movie, if you saw it in your past, and versus your experience with it now?
Well, I'm not actually sure if I ever did see this one. I'm pretty certain I saw the original partway through when they had like the Uncle Fester marriage plotline come in. I was like, okay, this seems vaguely familiar. I remember as a kid mixing this up a ton with the Munsters.
Yeah.
So that's what I remember, the Addams Family. But I mean, I loved it. It was fun. I remember liking the Addams Family. It was definitely different at the time, and I think it still feels fresh and unique even in 2020, which is kind of startling.
Yeah, I was surprised at how well several elements, usually when you watch a movie from your past and childhood, especially the 90s, I feel like you get a film where either the script doesn't hold, like it feels dated and old, and I know everything that's coming and I don't really feel entertained by it, or the setting or the visual style is sort of old and doesn't hold up. It seems like a time capsule. Because the Addams Family has such a weird gothic, Edward Gorey-ish kind of, I was going to say nouveau Victorian, but really it's like pre-Victorian, gothic vibe. It doesn't give itself to be dated because it already is so far out of the realm of the 90s or the 2000s that we're in now, that it's stayed true as its own thing and feels like it could have been made much more recently than it was, because it's essentially 30 years old now, 27.
Yeah, I mean, I think that has a lot to do with kind of what I think the message of Addams Family is, which is kind of you put this facade up of, this kooky and creepy family, but they say a lot of stuff that's like, maybe that would be a better way to kind of do a family. Like at the beginning, there's the joke where they're waiting for the baby and some girl is explaining to Wednesday how the birds and the bees, but it's this absurd story of like, and then the magic pigeon brings a diamond and you plant it in the most fertile ground or whatever, and then Wednesday's like, oh, that's neat, our parents had sex. Like,
yeah, it was,
and
sorry,
I'm just gonna say that maybe Wednesday's a little maladjusted, but she's not a stupid child, and you kind of take some, you lose some.
Yeah, and Wednesday is, of course, one of the lead stars out of this ensemble cast, right? And of course, it's played by Christina Ricci. I think this, she's been in plenty, but and I think this role really made her and set her as like the iconic goth character of our generation. And I don't know about everybody else, this is probably TMI, but she was like my first celluloid crush, because we're almost the same age. So it wasn't as though, it wasn't like looking at an adult, but I was like, wow, this is the coolest girl ever. And then I grow up and find out that she is, next to my wife, the coolest girl ever. She was uncredited doing some weird vocal tracks on one of Beck's last 3 albums. I mean, all sorts of things, like living my dream in so many ways. And she's, of course, been in so many iconic roles. All the way up to recently. My wife and I were having a discussion. I don't know if she, refused to fuck that fucking jelly man, Harvey Weinstein or whatever, but she disappeared off mainstream film for many years, but she always turned out fantastic indie projects, all the way up to Lizzie Borden Took an Axe, you know, like these really interesting films where you just look at it and she's always the star of the movie. And that's no different here. Every time she's on screen, she delivers the lines you remember. Like, she's a meme machine in this film. Let's listen to a clip. This is after Wednesday and Pugsley have dropped baby Pubert off the roof to see which bounces him or a bowling ball. And of course, Gomez catches the baby before it happens. And so they have a sit down talk with the family. And here's it.
Children, why do you hate the baby?
We don't hate him. We just want to play with him, especially his head.
Children, do you think we love the baby more than we love you?
Yes.
Do you think that when a new baby arrives, one of the other children has to die?
Yes. Well, that's just not true. Not anymore.
That is, of course, Carol Kane as Granny, who's Morticia's mom.
AKA playing herself.
Playing herself. Carol Kane is one of my all-time favorite actresses in the history of ever. She is in Dead Men Don't Die. She played the Penguin's mom in Gotham. She was, of course, in Scrooged. I mean, she's been, her
Princess Bride, of course. I mean,
Princess Bride. Her filmography is just too diverse and too massive. She's a comedy legend. She's a genius. And of course, she was in the amazing film that they did a riff tracks of somewhat recently, which will come to me, but in a serious role where she plays a murder attempt survivor. And she's just always great. And her voice, she has a high little voice. And so when they make her Granny, even though she's actually like younger than Angelica Houston, I think she's like a year younger than Angelica Houston, who she's playing the mother. Of course, they did tons of makeup. She's a joy. And she's only got a few lines in this movie. But I think they stand out. I think, and Greg and I had a little chat before we started while we were waiting for everybody to come in here today. And the thing that sort of blows me away about the Addams Family is how, and Jeff, you mentioned this too, they're the cartoon monster. Like, they're so macabre. In the beginning, the kids are having a solemn burial for a cat that sounds like it's still alive in the box. You know, like, just sort of gruesome, bleak family. But the adults are so clearly all about love. I mean, their family is so important to them. Of course, Gomez and Morticia have the greatest married relationship in cinema history. Like, Romeo and Juliet is a ridiculous farce compared to, you know, the true love that Morticia and Gomez have. They're physically attracted to each other. They're with each other all the time. You pretty much never see them apart. I was just going to add in, I love that, you know, like, near the beginning when the baby is born, they're arguing over, is it a boy or a girl? And, you know, Gomez runs out and he's like, it's an Addams, and then cue the theme song. And then, you know, you have near the end of the film, Fester comes back in and Gomez is like bereft in bed, like dying of sorrow. Literally dying, yeah.
Like, yeah, literally dying of sorrow that his brother's not going to talk to him again. And Fester comes back in, he's like, oh, like, you're a whatever now. And Fester's like, no, I'm an Addams. And that's like, you know, kind of what brings the family back around.
Gomez essentially bounces out of bed and the kids arrive. Like, it's just this beautiful moment. And I love the idea of having a family that's so focused on bizarreness and sort of revels in the misery side of life, you know, the cobwebs and the death and all this stuff, that they are compassionate. They're actually kind to everyone. And even when they have this great bit where Joan Cusack's character, Debbie, she's tried so hard to kill Fester and it hasn't worked at all. And so, and Fester has realized she's trying to kill him, run back to the Addams Family. They have this reconciliation, and then she shows up with a shotgun and hooks them all up, gets them, the entire family, all the way, including, except for the baby, who's in his crib somewhere else, all the way upstairs, hooked into electric chairs. So you have this entire family in electric chairs, and she gives a slideshow of her tragic life, which of course is not really tragic. She's clearly just a psychotic person from childbirth, right? Like, her parents got her a Malibu Barbie instead of a ballerina Barbie. She's a ballerina, not a Malibu Barbie. And so, like, she burns the house down with them inside, like, these crazy things. But every time she says, you know, these things like, I have been put upon, when it's my time, the family is like, so true, absolutely, you poor thing. Like, they're literally buying, like, they 100% feel for this twisted woman. And none of the family, I mean, except presumably the baby, which we'll talk about in a second, I'm sure, who ends up crossing the wires and electrocuting her into a pile of dust instead of any of the Addams family. They're like, you must. Like, she's like, what could I do but kill you? And they're like, nothing. You absolutely must. Like, it's just this beautiful acceptance and moment where I loved it. Like, the family is just so loving. Obviously, the kids are psychotic. Pugsley is sweet, but the kid, you know, Wednesday is a cold, sadistic, psychotic. But you love them, and you get the impression too with the way. For example, when they're talking about sibling rivalry, how Gomez and Fester were sort of torturous to each other in childhood, that the kids will grow up to be this loving, you know, Stan family, and it's wonderful. And I think that, especially because I don't know how huge it was, because the Addams Family was so iconic even before this with the black and white TV show, and before that with Charles Addams cartoons. But there was a pushback for these films. There were people who were upset about these, who, you know, especially some religious groups were like, it's vile, like it's disgusting, it's disturbing, which is kind of the point, right? Some of it is kind of disturbing. But they're missing the entire point, which is sort of what you said, Greg, and what you said, Jeff, which is these are cartoon villains. They're not the real villains. And they actually are professing just love. Their family is so important to them. And it was in the first one as well, and even more so in this plot. And I thought that was pretty fantastic. Let's get to the baby. So I kind of agree, Tad, that the baby is, he makes for some cute jokes. He's an adorable baby. The fact that he, of course, has, you know, a mustache and hair piece, essentially, is funny. I think that you could argue that he doesn't just serve as a tool to bring in Joan Cusack as Debbie, but also partway through the film, when Fester has become sexually entranced with Debbie and rebuffed all contact with his family, the baby turns into a blue-eyed, curly, golden-haired, idyllic child, and they're horrified, right? Like, Angelica Houston as Morticia is reading him a Dr. Seuss book, and he's giggling, and she looks at me and goes, and Adams loving this, or something like that. She's like, would you ever have thought? And just like the sorrow in her face. And she turns the page to the end of the book, and she goes, oh, he lives. Like, it's just the most ridiculous thing. But that is sort of Gomez's, it's assistance to the family to need Fester back, because they could have had it where, well, Gomez is bummed, but everybody else is operating fine. But really, they have to get Fester back because the baby is suffering from withdrawals from the family. That is, I agree, a weakish element. I don't think it's necessary to be strengthened, simply because, as you said, there's so much going on and so many moving parts that are coming together. We don't have time to worry about that. And then the final moment is that the baby has this ridiculous thing where he ends up causing a mousetrap-esque cavalcade of events that launch the baby through the skylight and then back down into the attic where the family's going to be electrocuted, and he can grab and switch the wires and kill Joan Cusack's character. So it's of course a hand of God moment. We know it. Especially at the time and in the theater, the idea of a bunch of happy families, because this is a family film, watching an infant be blasted through the skylight in a mansion and careen through the air and come back down is hilarious. It's over the top. It's more over the top, I think, than any of the rest of the movie, which is saying something, because at one point Fester survives a mansion explosion, still holding a dinner tray with like some hideous meatloaf he's made. And so, I mean, there's some ridiculous moments, but the entire ending bit of the baby frying Joan Cusack is the hardest pill to swallow. But for me, I don't know how other people feel, the movie did set it up to be this way. Like, I didn't expect there not to be some weird hand of God that was totally off the rails saving the film at the end.
Because that's what happens in every movie where there's a fucking baby character. Like, think of all the movies where there's
from The Incredibles.
baby. Yeah, it's the same bullshit.
Yeah, for sure. And he's and I actually, of course, Incredibles didn't come out for years until after this, but I actually got that a lot because Jack Jack's, if you haven't seen The Incredibles, I don't care if you like animated films or not, what are you doing with your life? Go watch the film. It's a brilliant Pixar film. It's my favorite Pixar film. But Jack Jack's is their baby that appears to have no powers and then turns out to have all sorts of powers, but just a random array. The baby in this film is like that, right? At one point, you can see him breathe fire several times from his crib. He catches a guillotine blade with his little baby fingertips. All sorts of fun things like that. So we knew that this is kind of where they're setting it up to some extent.
You know, I'll go further than Tad, and I'll say that the baby, I think, really points out that this film has some pacing issues. I think that that's the biggest thing, and nowhere is it more clear than whenever they're doing a bit with the baby, and you kind of start to think, like, what is the plot again? Like,
Why are we doing this?
where are we going? And I think the baby just draws attention to that otherwise
Probably.
very quick, snappy, smart, funny, wonderful writing turns into a bunch of, baby slapstick.
Because it is kind of skit-based, right? I mean, there is a plot, and it is carried, and it's essentially, it diverges in two, and then when it comes back together, it doesn't, like when the kids finally escape camp, which we'll talk about because it's one of the best scenes, in my opinion, in family cinema. When the kids escape and they come back, Fester, they're not saving Fester. Fester's already rescued himself, essentially, and has come back to the Addams house. So usually you would get that where the kids escape and then they save Fester's life or something. That doesn't happen. And I feel like you're pointing at the pacing issues is these two stories really don't, they're parallel and they come together at the end, but they do not impact each other, which is sort of an odd thing. And that's, if anybody saw The Secret Life of Pets 2, where they replaced comedian asshole Louis C.K. with Patton Oswalt, much more deserving. They're literally two separate movies. At the end, they come together. This is almost sort of the opposite. It's one movie that diverges, and then when they come together, it's just the conclusion of one of the plots. The summer camp episode is now over, and we're just finishing everybody up with the Uncle Fester episode. So when I'm watching it, I certainly didn't really feel affected by that. But when you view it from a narrative standpoint, I think you're totally spot on. We have to talk about the amazing, fantastic camp scene, because the camp
Krusty?
is Camp Krusty, right, for the Simpsons Camp Krusty. So everyone, I think if you remember something about this film, you probably remember this scene or somewhere close. I know Jeff did not remember it. It's when, and it's why it's on our Thanksgiving Day episode, even though it's a summer camp, this really elitist and sort of over-the-top camp culminates with one of the head campers' plays being produced, which is like the first Thanksgiving or something along those lines. And the first Thanksgiving is one of the most problematic tales in American history. We're to assume that pilgrims happily came together with Native Americans and shared a meal. Of course, that's not exactly correct. And something as dramatic as 92% of the entire Native population in the Americas was decimated by disease within the next decades. It didn't happen that way, guys. So we get a little of that in this play when the perfect camper, who is actually, I forget her name, it'll come to me, but she's in Buffy and Angel later as well, my wife pointed out. She is the perfect pilgrim and keeps making jokes about the dirty Native Americans because they don't use shampoo and they don't wear shoes, but they're welcome to feast. And Wednesday leads the Native Americans, who is a really interestingly inclusive group of kids, the outcasts of the camp, which include a kid in a wheelchair, a motorized wheelchair, people of color. And she leads a coup against the pilgrims and burns down the set and ties up the lead girl. And it's this beautiful child bloodbath, essentially, that really pokes fun at not just, it doesn't really poke fun at kids, it pokes fun at adults with kids, I feel like, because you have the parents in the stands, and instead of and they're all like proud of this ridiculous display, you know, this renegade Christmas pageant style play. And then Wednesday Adam destroys it, and the parents at first aren't even like terrified and running. They're just like bemused, like, what is this? Like, is this German expressionist art? Like, what's happening? And then of course they break into hysterics. And I guess the point is that this is very on the nose satire, but it works because we get two things. We get funny satire where Wednesday is leading a group of child campers to scalp the other campers because they're essentially brutal oppressors of the preppy regime. But we also get Wednesday's success story because she's been pushed down in this whole camp, even though it's clear she's smarter than everybody. And this is her victory lap. And she also, of course, makes kind of a little boyfriend with the little Jewish kid, which I also think is kind of funny because not because he's Jewish, but because the stereotype of his character as being the kid with the inhaler and the glasses and the mop top hair, not just because I was that kid, but him being so like delicate and being utterly attracted to the most dangerous, warped girl at camp. I always like that dynamic because
I love that they play up that they're both from different angles, obviously obsessed with kind of all the dangers of the world. Wednesday, like, oh, like knives, sharp objects, fire, etc. And he's like, oh, knives, sharp objects, fire, like.
But he collects serial killer trading cards and killing trading cards, you know, at one point. Yeah, it's great. I really liked that whole little side plot. And I love to, at the end, when everything's been wrapped up, they have him back. Her little boyfriend comes back and he tries to dress up like Gomez because of course he thinks that's what she wants. And I mean, psychologically, who knows, maybe it is, but we come back and they have this moment at the end where it looks like it's gonna, if it was another movie, they'd have a kiss or something. And instead they're in front of Debbie's grave and he's like, poor Debbie, she was sick. He goes, she wasn't sick. It's like, yeah, he was sick. No, she was sloppy. If I were going to kill my husband, no one would ever catch me. He's like, you don't mean that. He's like, I would scare him to death. And she's like, no, you wouldn't. He's like, I would. And then, of course, a hand reaches out from the grave and grabs him and he screams and she smiles. Like, it was important to me and a nice touch that they kept her character pure because it just wouldn't make sense if she wasn't still Wednesday Addams. It would have been this weird, you know, transformation that didn't make sense in the plot. So I liked that bit, assuming Pugsley is in the grave and she, you know, she's buried Pugsley most likely, and now she's using it to terrify her date. Like, there's just a great touch. The other thing I want to talk about is, and I mentioned it earlier, I feel like every single scene in this movie takes place in a radically expensive set piece, except for the aforementioned police station. Nowhere is normal. The rooms are, you know, gothically decorated in the house. And then when they're out of the house, they go to a dinner. The bistro that they dine in is like a cave. And there's like a quartet playing, but they're behind like bars with no doors. And there are like knives on the wall. And then that's, of course, in this film, when Gomez and Morticia have the iconic dance of this film. There was iconic dancing in the first movie as well, where Morticia and Gomez do this sexy dance that flings them both across the room several times and does crazy things like spinning Morticia so fast that she lights fire along the ground and throwing knives at Gomez. Just a great scene. I don't know how you guys felt. Like, I felt like every different scene change, I was looking all over the screen because there was stuff to look at everywhere.
It was a spectacle. However, I'm pretty sure if this movie was called Addams Family Goes to Camp and it was just the camp shit, I would have liked this movie a whole lot more. But then again, I'm still thinking, I can't remember what year Camp Krusty came out because I'm like, who ripped off who for this thing?
That's a good question. I mean, of course, you always have like things like Ernest Go to Camp or whatever. But for me personally, I actually probably could have done a little bit less with the camp, not because it wasn't good, but I thought that the other bit was more enticing for me, because I loved seeing Christopher Lloyd. He's so phenomenal, and I loved seeing Gomez. I mean, Raul Julia. This is, of course, Raul Julia passed away some years ago, and this to me was his crowning achievement, even though he had many wonderful roles.
Are you placing Gomez above his amazing award-winning performance as M. Bison?
M. Bison, I knew that was going to come up.
Come on,
yes,
man.
I am. Yes, I am. By the way, I want to note how offended I am on the IMDb is that he's more on the way they do aggregates for like what they're known for, quote unquote, is by how many people seem to, link their name with a film. He is more known for Street Fighter than he is for the Addams Family films. That is ridiculous.
Well, I mean, it's because the Street Fighter film ended with like a thing for him, like poor Raul, like Vaya con Dios, or whatever it says at the end of the movie, and Addams Family just shafted him. So
I think he was still alive when Addams Family was released.
Oh,
didn't he like sick during the filming and like died within a year or something?
Yes. Yeah. He died in 96, I think. 94. He died in 94. So, and he did a lot of great things. And it's interesting too that the word is that he actually played M. Bison because his kids like the games, which is really sweet because, I feel like a lot of us do things for the people we love that maybe we wouldn't have done otherwise. And I think Street Fighter 1994 fits that category because that was a terrible film, which I watch every chance I get. There was a movie that came out after that, by the way. Down Came a Blackbird was the film. It was his posthumous release film. And he had stomach cancer. And he had a surgery, and I don't know if the surgery is what ultimately caused his passing or the cancer, but he was, and of course he's from Puerto Rico, one of the, I would say one of the few Puerto Rican actors really up until our contemporary times to become as successful as he was. And I absolutely love him. And of course, Angelica Houston is wonderful. My wife was on a set that she was on at one point, and she was apparently very nice to everyone, but she's Angelica freaking Houston. She can be nice to whoever she wants. No, I mean, when you're that level of famous, what does it matter what you do, I guess. So we've talked a lot about this film. I think I love this film. I do think that there are pacing issues a little bit, but the film itself is the right length for me that I was never bored. It's an hour and 34 minutes. It's a quick one. The kids, it ends when the kids might be getting a little antsy, so it's not overwrought. And just an interesting thing is that Pubert Addams the baby is actually played by two babies, both of whom are ladies. Thought that was interesting. And I don't know if that makes this an early LGBTQIA plus film, but I would say no, because I don't think that it has anything to do with the plot.
That's a bit of a stretch.
It is a bit of a stretch. But I'm sure there's a paper written on it, and if there isn't, I will be writing it, because that shit will get published. All right, so shout out to everyone that was involved in this film. I think it was a great success. We're going to move on to the recommendations. Greg Johnson, who would you recommend Addams Family Values to, and why?
This will be, I think, a first for this pod. I'm going to recommend this to everyone. I mean, it was great. Pacing aside, contrived baby aside, it's fun. It's light. I would say you should probably watch the first one first, but I think that you can just hop into this one and enjoy it all the same. Yeah, it's still fresh in 2020, which is, funny for a macabre pseudo cemetery family.
Excellent. And I think that is a first. I'm not sure you've ever given a wholehearted recommendation across the board.
I think I've lived a sad life of hating a lot of things, and this might be the one joy I've had in a while.
glad we could provide it to you.
Best movie yet. Wow.
Jeffrey Tucker, who would you recommend Addams Family Values to and why?
Yeah, I mean, like if you have a family and you love somebody, probably you can find something in here that relates to you. Yeah, I mean, I love these films. I think the characters are very interesting. The only thing that I don't like about this film is that I think there's too much plot and we just didn't get the family. I think the writers kind of wrote themselves into a corner, and they separated the family. There's like all in different locations, so they couldn't interact with each other. So if you can't interact with each other, you can't get screen time for all of those characters. But yeah, other than that, like, yeah, the movie works for me. The problems aside, it just is a great family, and I love them, and they love each other, and lots of love. Oddly,
right, oddly, yeah, and I think you make a good point too, and Greg as well. And I think this feeds together into the same thing. Is watching the first film first. That sounds funny. Watching the first film first, watching the first entry into this franchise before this movie, and then watching it, probably, I'm not sure. I think it might help that as well, because that's when we see the family together. And so for this entry, maybe it was a chance where they're like, well, if we separate them, it's going to be different because they're interacting with the world more than interacting with each other, which we've already seen. And so I'm going to have to go back and do that as well, because the first film is totally worth watching. If you enjoy this one, Barry Sonnenfeld's still on it. It's the same cast. It's some brilliant stuff. I'll also mention, before we get to Tad and myself, that of course last year, 2019, we did get the Addams Family, a 3D animated reboot. I have seen that film. I would not compare it to these films, because I think that the 90s, the Addams Family movies, with the exception of the ugly duckling Addams Family reunion with Tim Curry, it's an okay film, the 3D animated film. I think your kids will enjoy it. You'll enjoy it eventually, but I will say as an adult, it took a little longer to get into, because it doesn't have the majesty that this film and the Addams Family before it had. So if you really like the Addams Family, of course, watch the new one. I think you'll like it. But if you go in hoping that it's going to be the birth of a new brilliant franchise like this film was, or like the previous film that this is a sequel to was, you're not going to get it. So don't be disappointed. But I think, sure, give it a watch. Tad Mastroianni, who would you recommend the Addams Family it's actually Addams Family Values to, and why?
Anyone who grew up enjoying eating the Addams Family cereal like I did.
The Addams
But
Family
and all
cereal.
I can't help it. I grew up in an era where the cartoon was on, and man, I certainly remember hearing all the commercials about the cereal all the time. But if you like the gothic comedy horror-ish sort of deal that Tim Burton pioneered, and if you like the monsters, because frankly, yeah, there we go, he's got it.
Yeah, and those of you who aren't Patreon members, you can't watch the video of this, although join for $1 a month at www.patreon.com/Cult and Classic Podcast, and you can see what I'm doing. I'm holding an Uncle Fester figure from the television show that followed these movies, the cartoon, which I got sent to Cult and Classic from Uncle Mike's Pop Culture Market, which is a great place. Check them out on Instagram. I agree. The cartoon was fun. I would just also want to give a plug. Addams Family, the film before this, sort of led to the creation of one of the best original Nintendo Entertainment System games, Fester's Quest. Check it out. Super great game. Top-down action game. Brilliant. Brilliant. And I think that comes to me. Who would I recommend this film to is why I recommend this film to everyone, especially if you like macabre stuff. If you're really, I'm not using this as a derogative term, but if you're really vanilla white bread, maybe it's just not going to be your cup of tea. But if that's the case, I have no idea what you're doing listening to Cult and Classic Podcast. So I'm just going to say, listeners, enjoy. This is one for the books. Watch it. Personally, I actually think this is superior than to the first film, which is kind of unusual. But they're both part and parcel. You shouldn't skip either. And also, they've been re-released as a 2-pack on Blu-ray recently for, I think, something like $14.99. So absolutely get it. It's worth it, and it's worth the Blu-ray or 4K transfers. Are really good. All right, so that's it for Addams Family Values. We're going to jump ship and tackle Thanksgiving right up next. Hey, Cult and Classic crew, friends and fiends of the pod, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Nate, I don't have any money, and if I did, I'd be spending it on cool things like buttons and custom trading cards and zines that are unique and made each week by the Cult and Classic podcast family. And guess what? You can do both of those things at once. You can support cultandclassicpodcast.com and get awesome swag like buttons and custom trading cards that are printed on actual trading card stock by actual trading card printers and autographed by the artist, and also zines like classic issues of Rearted with comics and illustrations and interviews, as well as brand new Cult and Classic Podcast family publications that are brand new, so you'll get them first in line. These are awesome things that you can get just by joining our Patreon at patreon.com/cultandclassicpodcast. For as little as $1 a month, you can get videos of our episodes, so you can see all our lovely shining faces, as well as exclusive content like extra episodes, film reviews, book reviews, and things like commentary by us on our short films, which you'll also be able to see. If you want to pay a little more, $5 a month per se, US, then you get an awesome autographed custom trading card. These are official, printed at the same place that prints every other trading card you've ever bought, and they're autographed by the artist. These are exclusively for Cult and Classic Podcast and inspired by our episodes. You can't get them anywhere else except through us. Only $5 a month, you get it shipped right to you. Shipping is free. If you pay $10 a month, if you are a true drinker of the Kool-Aid for cultandclassicpodcast.com, then you will get the trading card, access to all of the content that is exclusive to Patreon members, and you will get a brand new zine every month, whether it's a classic copy of Rearted zine with interviews, comics, art, all sorts of cool stuff, or brand new Cult and Classic Podcast family publications. Those will get sent straight to your door. Plus, there's usually extras like pins, stickers, all sorts of cool stuff. So you're doing two great things. You are spending money on awesome swag, and you are supporting Cult and Classic Podcast. I know it's tough right now in the pandemic. If you can do it, join us at Cult and Classic Podcast Patreon. If you can't, why don't you recommend it to a friend? We all have those rich friends, and they can spread it around a little more. I'm just going to say it. All right? Thank you so much. And as always, Cult and Classic Podcast loves you. And we are back talking about our Thanksgiving double feature. A couple of notes that we went over that were brought up with the break. We should talk about Christine Baranski, amazing comedic actress, super awesome. She was a big part of the Sybil show with Sybil Shepherd, which was fun. And of course, she was Mary Sunshine in the film version of Chicago. She was in this as one of the camp counselors. And that actress who played the perfect little girl foil to Wednesday Addams at camp was Mercedes McNabb. Thanks, Greg, for that find. She played Harmony in Angel and Buffy. And she also, interestingly enough, Greg pointed out, she had a bit part in the first the Addams Family film where she plays a Girl Scout that goes door to door. So they could actually be the same person. It's interesting. We don't really know, but it's kind of neat. And horror fans may recognize her better from the Hatchet series. She was Misty in Hatchet and Hatchet 2. So here we are with another Thanksgiving film, Thanksgiving from 2009. I think I can safely say, I mean, this film was released relatively wide. It's a very low budget film. It was released, I mean, you could have bought it at Walmart. I literally saw it there one day, and I don't even shop at Walmart. But you can imagine what a movie about a killer turkey that is a hand puppet is like, and then throw that imagination out the window, because I guarantee this movie is actually different. It is crazy. It is only an hour and 6 minutes. I love this movie personally, which is why I subjected it to my panelists. And I think it's pretty safe to say also that Jeff, Tad, Greg, none of you guys saw this movie before I sent you review copies, correct?
No.
Okay.
Turns out I did.
You
and
had
I
seen
blocked
this?
it out of my memory. I watched this with a few of my friends back when I was living in Western Massachusetts because some of these scenes I was like, oh my God, I've seen this before. Oh, 2009, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
probably really drunk when I watched this movie.
Probably. I mean, they were when they made it. I'm just kidding. No, it's actually that's actually not true. And so this film, the plot as such, it's really more of a series of skits that loosely form a plot. Is that Turkey, Turkie, who is the lead monster, the turkey itself, is a spirit, a vengeful spirit that was created by, quote, the greatest Native American sorcerer. And his entire purpose is to show up every 505 years and wreak vengeance on the descendants of the pilgrims who blighted the Native American populace. Now, as I said, Turkey is a hand puppet. He has real turkey feathers on his back. He actually looks like a turkey. I mean, from the neck down, he looks like a turkey. And his head is turkey-esque, but he's got this evil little eyes and grin. He's clearly rubber, but I've seen much worse hand puppets in bad films before, so I'll grant that. Now, if you seek out the DVD for this, which I urge you to do, in the upper left-hand corner on the cover, the first thing it says is boobs in the first second. It's true. There are boobs in the first second in this movie. They're the only breasts in the film.
Delivers.
I mean, kind of. They did a little bit of exposition in, like, you know.
Yeah, I think it may be more accurate to say,
you know?
like the first 2 seconds. I didn't time it, but I think that might be the case.
We'll see about getting that class action going.
I feel lied.
Now, the character, so I don't know, it is, so the actress in the beginning whose breasts are exposed, she plays a pilgrim in this. She's credited only as Naked Pilgrim. It's Wanda Lust is her career name. She is an adult actress who I think was in features from 2005 into the, I think Thanksgiving 3, which is technically the sequel to this, is the last film that she did. Perhaps she's done more, but I think also Thanksgiving 1 and 3 are the only non-pornographic films that she's done. So good for her. Yeah, I don't. Here's the brilliance of this film, and I am using the word brilliance, and I'm not doing it sarcastically. It is very short, and they don't fuck around with their pacing, for lack of better words. It's very quick moving. If there's a scene of dialogue between characters that's exposition as opposed to just jokes, you know that you're not going to have to sit through it for 5 minutes. It's going to at max be a couple of minutes, and then they're going to cut to the next thing. The voice of Turkey is, I don't actually know who did the
Jordan
voice of
Downey, is that what it says?
So is that the voice?
That's at least what IMDb gives it as. Jordan Downey, who is doing his best.
He's the director, yeah. So you're right.
Okay.
Yeah. So he's the director, and he voiced Turkey. So that's, and he also co-wrote the film with Kevin Stewart, and then there were three other people who did additional writing credits. I'm sure they were punch-up doctors essentially to add jokes. Grant Yaffe, Anthony Wilson, and Bradley Schultz. So Jordan Downey, I think he does fine as the voice of Turkey. Yeah, he does a little gravelly, sort of Brad Dourif-ish. I mean, no one can touch Brad Dourif, especially.
I was going to say it was a John J. Dick impression from Serious Sam, if you ever played that game.
Sure, absolutely. This sort of gravelly. So his first lines, the first lines in the film at all, is "Nice tits, bitch." Those are the first lines spoken by the rubber turkey before he apparently hatchets the naked pilgrim to death. Then when he reappears, the plot, if you're looking for any sort of realism in the plot, you're looking in the wrong place. That's not what this movie is about. And I don't think they make any bones about that or any claims otherwise. He shows up again when a hermit who is billed, his actual name playing the hermit is General Bastard. General Bastard's collie, who I swear he says the name different every time, but I think it's billed as Flashy, pees on a small totem pole in the woods, which apparently wakes up Turkey and sends him on his new killing spree. Supposedly this is 510 years in the future. At one point they say 510 because he's 510 years old. I guess it's supposed to be he's a 5-year-old turkey who then is reanimated, and then every 505 years comes back. I guess why. So it's been 505 years. That's why he's waking up, to take revenge. But he wakes up at the time Flashy the dog urinates on his head. And his next lines in the film after Nice Tits Bitch are piss, fuck. That's literally his lines. And the delivery is actually makes me laugh every time. It's that stupid, and it's kind of brilliant. If you think that's the craziest thing to expect in this movie, again, you're wrong. Because this film crosses PC boundaries quite a few times. Two scenes exceptionally so, I think. And I'm not talking about the scene where they have a little bit of animated backstory, whereas they show the Native American sorcerer with unusually large nipples. That's not one of the things I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is during one of the kill scenes when the quote unquote slutty character is having sex with some guy that has never been in the movie until this moment. And the turkey kills him and then takes his place and begins having sex with the woman before killing her. And it is so inappropriate and so, at this point though, because it's about halfway through the film, as Greg mentioned to me earlier, we're not shocked, I don't think, by anything in this film. And it's so ridiculous. I mean, it is literally a rubber turkey riding on a person's back with one of his little turkey legs over her bum. I mean, it is so ridiculous. And then when the other friends that we'll get to who find this person's body, he found a dirty feather and an wrapper for a extra small gravy flavored condom. Now, you can't hear it because he's muted, but Tad is laughing. This is a good clue to Tad's taste level, but mine too, because it is laugh-worthy, because it's so insane. I mean,
I don't have standards.
You can't be offended by this film because it's so off-the-wall ridiculous. Because even the joke doesn't really work. I mean, why would turkeys have gravy-flavored condoms? Turkeys don't like gravy. Turkeys are served with gravy. And then if you take it the extra step to say, well, if you're giving an oral sex to a turkey, maybe you're tasting turkey. That still doesn't work because it's a condom. Get your mind out of the gutter. The point is that these teens, they're, I guess, supposed to be teens. They're not really teens. They're college age, although I'm pretty sure they range from like 19 to 42. They read their lines. They don't really act. They read their lines. But that's fine. That's fine.
What they were paid to do.
I would even say the characters, like in the script writing, I'm pretty sure that the dialogue, at least in the first like 30 minutes, was essentially a person rolling a dice and then like assigning like the line that somebody was going to say like randomly to like the different people, because like it's just chaos. Like characters like change their moods like within like a sentence, and like, you know, their entire like point of view and like characterization changes in like, you know, the next sentence. It's like it seems almost like it's written with like dice rather than which I think is interesting. I think it's actually an interesting way to
I think Jeff's onto something here. I think
we
we can
do
that
kind
for
of
our
like a
next movie.
crazy make it almost so stilted that it's like, okay, I can't be mad at them because this is just so bad.
Sure. Well, and I think too, what were we gonna say?
Oh, I was gonna say, is it almost, Jeff, like one guy wrote this and it's all his jokes, and then he just had a bunch of characters say his jokes?
Yeah, I mean, it's something like, because like, I mean, there was just like, there's like a couple times where like a character was like, you know, very like the large guy who kind of was initially characterized as kind of this like like I don't care about anything, like everything's a joke, and then literally within the like two lines of dialogue, he like changes from that into being like really afraid and being like, oh, you know what? I believe this story now. I'm now really afraid of this turkey. Even though like 2 lines ago he was like laughing about.
Can we get though to why he's afraid of the turkey? Because here's what happens. There's 5 friends, okay? And I'm going to run through their stereotypes really quickly. Allie, played by Natasha Cordova. She's the slutty one. There's Kristen, played by Lindsay Anderson, who's the pure one that everyone wants to have sex with for some reason, I don't know. Then there's Johnny, Lance Predmore, which sounds like Predator Moore, and that's really weird because he's the attractive one who I think is 42. And then there's Billy, who's the larger gentleman you're talking about, Aaron Ringheiser Carlson. And then there is Darren, who's the nerdy one who they all just met except for Overweight Billy. And Overweight Billy and Darren are best friends. Now, he's the nerdy one who, Ryan E. Frankus is his name. The reason that I'm actually reading the names is because they don't have huge credits to their list. So I'm not going to say them again, not because I want to disrespect them at all, but because I won't remember them. Because I believe they have been in films. In fact,
you could call this a film, kind of.
It is over an hour, so it is a feature film. And to be fair, the slutty one played by Allie, Natasha Cordova, she was in multiple episodes of telenovela, La Vida de Rafael. She's been in some other things. And then we've got some pedigree because Lindsay Anderson, who plays the other one, the pure one, Kristen, she was in Terror Firmer, the famed trauma film from 1999. She was the two-sexed freak, the woman. And then Lance Predmore, who's the attractive one, Johnny, he was in a film called Elementary and Education and Death, which is one of the greatest titles I've ever heard, from 2009. And then Aaron Ringheiser Carlson, who played Billy. He only played Billy in Thanksgilling. I don't think he has any other credits to his name. So I just said all that information out to you so I can feel better about not using their actual names because I don't remember them. Now I can get to the point. The overweight gentleman became a believer in the killer turkey overnight because he woke up with a hermit with a shotgun telling him that I just saved your life because a turkey was going to pluck your eyes out. And the proof is that he shit on your chest. Yes, he did. I'm pretty sure there were marshmallows rolled in cocoa is what they used as the
That's not what turkey shit looks like anyway.
If it isn't, I mean, I don't know. I'm not, it is pretty much not. Because I've eaten whatever was on his back or his sleeping bag, and it was not turkey feces. I hope.
Well, actually, so just as one correction, randomly in the middle of a conversation, he actually swapped his tune and started to believe in the turkey even before I went to bed, which is one of like the character switch. I think most specifically Billy and Darren like swap personalities like a couple times. Which was especially weird.
You're talking about the overweight person and the supposedly smart nerd.
Yes. Yeah. And
the smart nerd. So he has this interesting character choice he made to like rub his mouth like he's got snot on it like every few seconds. At first, I'm like, that's really ridiculous. But by the end, I was like, yeah, you know what? Good on you, buddy. Good on you for having read that Stanislavski Acting 1 book and taking it to the bank. And he also has my favorite death scene in the film. That's something else. So mention the plot. Obviously, once the turkey comes back and starts killing these people, he kills their families because they're around them. Of course, their plan is to then send this turkey back to hell. And there's a way they have to do it. They find a book in the pure girl's dad's garage because he's a book guy. So of course he must have a book about demon turkeys. He just so happens to have a book about demon turkeys that is clearly upon close-up jaggedly cut cardboard folded in half. Pretty cool. I like the prop department. But I think it's important to say there's a high body count in this movie, and the special practical effects are actually pretty decent for a lot of it. Like,
well, how about when going to that aforementioned scene when they go up to get the book? Who's at the door waiting for them? But the pure girl's dad, which is actually the turkey puppet, and this is really hard to spot, but it's the turkey puppet wearing a flesh mask of the father, and everyone just kind of, oh, okay, and
no, and like they're all like bent over. That's the best part of the movie.
The best part of the movie. I'm going to correct you. The best part of the film by far is when is when Chuck Lamb, who he's known in some circles as the dead body guy, because he's been in many, many television and shows and films as a person who dies and he's in a dead body. Kind of a cool guy. He is represented by an actual talent company. He plays Sheriff Roud, Kristen's dad. And the best scene is when the turkey shows up at his door before the teens have arrived, and he has the Groucho Marx glasses with the little plastic nose. And he's like, is Amy home? And he's like, oh, do you mean Kristen? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, are you a friend? Yeah. Okay, well, come on in and wait. And then they have this conversation that kind of starts this way. They're both sitting drinking coffee at the table, and then this conversation occurs here.
Bless you.
Allergy season, you know. Fucking weather. But it was nice today, huh?
Did you just say fucking?
What do you mean? Is that supposed to mean that midgets can't cuss?
I wasn't worried about the size of the fuck. I was worried about the age of the fuck. How old are you?
510 years old.
Fuck it then, I guess you can say.
That is the best line. And that to me is legitimately good writing. And Chuck Lamb obliterated that part. He actually acted in that. And can we also mention the first time we see Chuck Lamb's character, the sheriff, he is given a cup of coffee by his wife.
Oh,
and
God.
He takes a drink and dribbles it all over his face and then says, this coffee tastes like shit. Did you put shit in my coffee? And she pulls the coffee pot out and shows it to him, and there is shit in it. And she says, yes, I did. I want a divorce. And she picks up the car keys and walks out the door. And he does not react. And then he tells his daughter on the phone, by the way, your stepdaughter left me. Love you, hon. Click. Like, I mean, it is so... the movie is so aware of how ridiculously bad it is that I find it really entertaining and refreshing. It's not trying to do anything. It's doing exactly what it set out to do.
Yeah, Chuck Lamb really gave us more than we deserved in this film.
Oh, totally. Chuck Lamb should literally, I mean, I'm looking forward to Nicolas Cage's Joe Exotic in his Tiger King show. Absolutely. But Chuck Lamb could literally be Joe Exotic. I mean, he could put in the teeth, bleach his mullet, get a mullet, and he could literally be Joe Exotic. It was a masterpiece to me. Every time he was on screen, I was highly entertained. And the fact that that conversation continues on, and then yes, Turkey wears a very obvious skin mask, and they all just it's not until Billy's character, the heavyset gentleman, walks into the kitchen and sees Turkey with the skin mask moving the skinned face body of the sheriff, that he's like, if that's the sheriff, then it's you. Like that ridiculous, it's another level. Like the movie continually amps up the insanity just a little bit every time until they could do whatever they want at the end. It's not going to matter at all. I mean, it's not going to matter at all. I'm going to watch it. There's animated scenes. I mean,
I love that.
Were you guys at all surprised when Billy is like, I'm done with you guys? He's walking down the street by himself at night, and he's so hungry that apparently Turkey is able to make himself appear like an animated cooked turkey, which
it's like out of a Looney Tunes cartoon.
Which then Billy picks up. Of course, it's just like a photoshopped image over the thing, and he puts it in his mouth, and then is super satisfied until his gut explodes outward, and we see like the 3-foot-long gun barrel come out with Turkey. I mean, it's so, we're smiling listening to it because it's so insane that it got me. Like, how are you supposed to argue with a film that is so ridiculous? I don't think you can.
The musical bit. The musical bit was amazing.
When Darren the nerd sees his friend Billy dead, his best friend, there is a musical montage that is, I think the lyrics are something along the line of my best friend's dead, Billy, you're my best friend, you're dead.
And like, you were killed by Turkey, who's not my friend.
It is, I mean, It's so we've mentioned this several times on this podcast. Tad and Jeff, you will know that in high school we started a project called Zombie Dance,
Oh,
which was
fuck. I
a
knew you were gonna
comedy
bring this
horror.
up.
I know. And although our taste level, I would say, is a few marks higher than most of this film, this is very much what I think Zombie Dance would have had
been.
we had more cohesion amongst ourselves and money. B. And
What's the best line from Zombie Dance, Nate?
I mean, your Zombie Dance?
Yeah.
That's your script. That was
No. The best line in the movie because it wasn't scripted.
as he's being killed. I must retain my memories so I don't become gay again. Yes, it was a different time, folks. Okay,
it was
Culture
not
Classic
scripted.
Podcast 100% supports the LGBTQIA+ and trans communities. And I will say this. I don't think Thanksgiving is mean to anyone either. Sometimes you see, especially a film where you see the killer essentially, this is going to be crude sounding, ghost fuck someone and then murder them. That sounds horrendous, but it is just ridiculous. As I said, I'm not trying to apologize for it. I don't think I need to apologize for anything. I didn't make this movie, but they were like, "What if we did that?" And they're like, "That's so wrong." And they're like, "We're gonna do it." Also, when the turkey steals a car by hijacking a car, and the guy opens the door for the turkey and says, "Cash, grass, or ass," and the turkey looks at him and says, "Well, I don't have any cash, so I guess ass." And he turns around to display what we assume is his asshole to the driver. And then the driver reaches forward to, I guess, have sex with this street turkey. At which point the turkey then whips around with a shotgun, points it at the guy, and has it against the guy's face. And the guy's like, "No, please, I have a wife, I have a daughter." And he's like, "Call her." And he has the guy call his wife on the phone. This is like a 3.5 minute bit. Call his daughter, have a brief conversation with his daughter, and then shoot the man and then take his car. I mean,
mid-conversation.
The Joaquin Phoenix's Joker was not as dark as that. Yet this film does not feel dark.
Pretty sure that's the scene from No Country for Old Men, right? That happens exactly.
Yes, and let's talk about too. We mentioned how the film was voiced and co-written by Jordan Downey, who directed it. He actually has cinematic sensibility. For example, when this occurs, when he gets shot, we see footage of the fields with lambs look up and then put their heads back down. That's not the kind of oh shit shot that someone who doesn't understand cinema would do. So he actually has some knowledge. And I want to say that last year he put out another film, a serious film that's also co-written by Kevin Stewart called Headhunter, which we might tackle on this podcast at some point. But it is a serious film and it's quite beautifully shot. So that is further credit to them. That is probably why this film works, because, and I think it does work personally, is that if you don't understand how to set up a shot and how to flow from scene to scene, as so many bad movies don't understand, then you're not actually going to have a satisfying movie at all. I haven't even really given you guys a chance to enter on this yet. Greg, what was your expectation of this movie versus now that you've seen it?
I mean, I expected it to just be wild, and that's exactly what I got. I mean, I've talked before about how much I love Santa's Sleigh, the I think William Goldberg vehicle, and I put this right up there with it. If, like, you know, I kind of expected everything, and I got that, and like you said, a turkey having sex with someone and then killing them. So
yeah, I
quite
mean,
a lot.
And I will say, and Santa's Sleigh I think is totally fun as well. And I think the difference is the production values, right? Santa's Sleigh has cameos and production values. This one, it makes everything adequate, which is a success for essentially what appears to be an almost no budget feature.
I think this movie also knows when to get off the horse. Like you said, it's 70 minutes, and I didn't really have a chance to be bored, which was nice.
Yeah. And
I think it was even 5 minutes longer. It would have been like,
Yeah.
we
Sure,
get it.
sure. Well, and they even I mean, they troll the viewer, right? Like they have, at first, they repeat a joke several times from like 20 minutes apart. And you think, is this a mistake? But then they bring it back again. Like, and the joke, one of the jokes, there's two, but one of them in particular that they bring back the most is in the beginning when they're all like carpooling to drop each other off at their homes for Thanksgiving break, because that's of course when this takes place. They're like, you're kind of a skank and you're kind of a slut. And Allie's character's like, what do you mean? And Kristen goes, her legs are harder to keep closed than the Joan Benet Ramsey case. And which is a good joke. And then she says that exact same joke like 20 minutes later in the car in the same setting, and everyone reacts as though they've never heard it. And I literally, especially the first time I watched this, I was like, did they forget that they included that in that shot before?
I did a double take on if it was the same shot.
Yeah, and right. And then the next, they do it, then later Darren's character, the nerd, tries to tell the joke and he butchers it. And I'm like, okay, they're aware that they've retold this joke several times. But we weren't in on that awareness until that moment. And I felt totally trolled by the film.
It kind of reminds me of, for people that have seen Black Dynamite, there's a bit where like you see the boom mic come down and he like looks up and looks at it and it hits him in the head. And it like that kind of intentional, like, hey, like let's make a modern movie that feels like a very cheap 70s or 80s film. That said, I think Lindsay Anderson as Kristen, I think she does look at the camera pretty dead on early in the movie, which I don't know. I have to imagine that they left that in purposely, but like they're trying to fix the car and she kind of looks down and I'm like, did someone say something to her? With like the camera's at a low angle, so I'm like, maybe the camera operator was being weird and she was like, what are you doing? But like,
yeah, there's a lot of, and here's the thing, as I read everyone's credits, most of the cast does have at least one other credit on a nationwide release film or you know, a large indie film. And so these are not people, this is not necessarily their first film for most of these people, although it's early for them. So I have to assume that much of their insane line deliveries is because it was a one-take wonder or a very few takes, because they literally deliver lines as on a whole, as though they have never spoken to a human being before. Sometimes they're often just delivering lines into space. It's like sort of a recorded animatronic creature that's facing roughly towards another animatronic creature, and they're just on timers setting their speech. But it works for this sort of movie because it tells you right away that this is not a serious film. And I also want to talk about the fact that there's a lot of horror tropes that they mess with intentionally. So the hermit shows up again to sort of stop the turkey from escaping when they've tied the turkey in his teepee, because that is where the turkey sleeps and eats salad that he is tossing. Make of that what you will. The turkey escapes after they've taken away his invincibility using a spell, and he runs out, and then he gives the memorable line, "Oh fuck," because the hermit is there and shoots him with a shotgun. He then goes flying in a bloody heap into a waste bin, like an open waste bin, as one would expect on a street before pickup. And they're like, oh, I guess we don't have to burn him. Like, he's clearly dead. And so they leave. And then later on, they're having a conversation at Kristen's house, I guess with her dead dad in the living room or something. And she has, and Johnny's character says, well, I think he's dead, right? I mean, he's got to be dead, unless that was like toxic waste or something. And then, of course, they show a shot of the trash bin and as a sticker, like, danger, nuclear waste. And so the turkey comes back glowing green, kills Darren in a pretty great death scene. Like, he pulls his tongue out, which is gruesome. That's a classic slasher horror effect where it pulls apart. But then he, like, in fast forward motion, rapidly pecks lightly at his shirt until there's a bloody hole and he can pull out his whole heart with his beak. I loved that. And then he kills Johnny with one of those automatic turkey carving knives, which, has anybody ever used one? Because that looks like the stupidest, most impossible, most functional device ever.
I've used it. I definitely prefer to just carve manually because there's a lot of margin for error with those those mechanical knives.
I every time I see one, I'm like, this looks like a as seen on TV thing that is impossible to use.
It's very much for show.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, this is like something people would buy in the 50s to show how well they're doing. Like, don't use your sharp knife, Steve. What are you, a caveman? Try this new slash-o-matic. Yeah, so he gets killed with that. And then, of course, it's Kristen's turn to kill this creature. So she uses a can of spray paint and a lighter to light him on fire, and then uses a baseball bat to knock him into a conveniently placed funeral pyre where he burns. The thing is, though, is that as he lands and he burns, roasted turkey leg flies out of the pyre, and she walks up and grabs it. The hermit pops into frame out of nowhere and says something like, nice job, or like, that was pretty, you did badass job. And she's like, I know. And she takes a bite of the turkey leg. That to me was kind of a great ending for this, because if they had any sort of, if they didn't have that little ridiculousness, if it wasn't the combination of her like 180 degree shift into badass, eating from the turkey leg that just fell out of the fire, the turkey cursing that he will get them all back, and the hermit popping into frame out of nowhere, it wouldn't have been satisfying to me. If in any other way the turkey had died, I would not be okay with this. How did you guys feel about the ending?
It was as insane as the rest of the film. It just, yeah. I mean, that was like the one thing that, like, it actually took me, like, I was a little annoyed by the kind of like the random dialogue at the beginning until I like really realized what this film was. Like, I thought it was a little bit more like a Ginger Dead Man, which is a film we previously talked about, which was just going to be kind of like a true.
It's a movie.
Well, like a movie, a movie where you have a scary monster that creates tension, and you're like scared that their characters are going to die to it. And this is just not that. This is
not at all,
not even remotely close. And once I realized that, I was able to accept like basically any insane thing that happens. It was
yeah,
just
totally
madness.
And was that what you expected going in?
No. Well, like I said, I expected
a Ginger Dead Man.
Yeah,
for sure. And this easily could have been that, right? Like if you'd pitched it to someone, say, hey, I want to make a killer turkey movie. There's the Black Sheep film, which came out, it's been a while now, but in the 2000s, where there are literally, like, they're man-eating sheep. They're sheep. They don't talk or anything. And it's kind of a great film. And it's this weird, bleak horror comedy that's extremely violent. And this could have been that. But instead, it definitely went the like super low budget Child's Play Chucky knockoff route, like a quip spouting puppet that actually has personality. Like I liked seeing him, and he actually, like, I wouldn't say he has good one-liners because he really doesn't, but he makes for entertaining conversation, at least with Chuck Lamb and the sheriff. Like that scene really made the film for me. And then wearing the face and them not acknowledging it, bending down to talk to him and hug him. It's sort of like, it's like SNL doesn't even reach this level of ridiculousness, because there's usually one straight character, that's like playing it serious and is confused why everyone's being ridiculous. This has none of that. The entire cast, everything is ridiculous, which sets it apart from the sort of stupid film like, and I say stupid in an endearing way, stupid film like Dumb and Dumber or Ace Ventura or Anchorman, like everyone is normal. These characters are crazy. In THANKSKILLING, all the characters are crazy. No one is normal. It's closer to an Adult Swim show than it is, say,
I was actually going to say, it's like kind of Tim and Eric. It has like that just like randomness. Things just are happening. And like the jokes aren't necessarily like funny, but it's just like kind of the awkward, like weird, like just it is the thing that kind of creates the humor. And
Robot Chicken works on the same principle. Like it's just subverting expectations and making fun of things in a way. They're not even making fun of it. They're just sometimes they're making fun of it, but other times they're just showing you something weird. And it's fast enough that you're engaged the whole time because it isn't what you're expecting. And it is, in the basest sense, a form of joke because you're subverting the expectation. But it's not a joke in that there's a wit to it necessarily. So I think that's a very clean observation. Tad, what did you think going into this film? What did you think it was going to be like versus when you actually saw it?
Every time we get one of these movies in our rotation, I go, is this going to be worse than Shark Exorcist? And I've still yet to find anything that matches
we
up.
set the bar right at the bottom.
We set that bar so low. This is I think that this ended up being the most expensive $3,500 movie I think I ever looked at. I was surprised because,
you mean quality wise?
Yeah, I believe the budget was $3,500. And I honestly, like, when the movie started, I thought that Wanda Lust was going to be the most expensive part of this movie. And it turns out maybe she didn't even get paid at all. Maybe she just did this because she thought she could, like, get some extra exposure.
Literally.
Yeah. But
hey, that joke would have fit in this film.
No, it totally would. I expected that, honestly. Which is, I went into this and going, I can't believe actually how decent the quality is. Like the animatronics were pretty good.
It mastered the sound. Just like the sound is mastered, even though occasionally, like in an outside scene, maybe it's a little different. It's mastered. You can understand them. We know on this podcast how difficult it is sometimes for Nate to get the sound right.
The little animated section was actually pretty
seriously,
good.
Like someone's.
I was like, wow, this I like the art style and like.
Sure. Yeah. No.
Pretty well put together.
And I think that gets to the point. They enjoyed this. I think it feels like it was enjoyed, and it wasn't. Sometimes you'll see a film in the no budget category or ultra low budget category, which I love. But you'll see a film where it's friends with a camcorder. It's not really a movie. It's just a bunch of people, and they didn't really. When they put it together, they weren't there to put on any extra polish. They're like, no, it's done. Like this is what this is, and it's this. In this film, they actually made sure that certain things worked. Like, for example, and I didn't notice the first several times I watched this film until for this episode, I watched it on a bigger screen. And the scene where it's nighttime, so it's dark, where Darren, Johnny, and Kristen's characters are all looking in at the purportedly dead bleeding turkey in the trash can. It's dark, it's all black around them, but it's actually gray, of course, right? Because it's real life. It's not a solid true black. And in the upper right-hand corner, there were little speckles of light. I couldn't figure out what it was. And in the upper corner was like a triangle of blackness that was darker than the rest. It was a boom mic, but you can't tell because what they did is they put an overlay on, probably in Adobe Premiere or Final Cut Pro or something like that, where it was a mostly darkened, it was a darker corner, okay? It was less exposure or whatever tool they used. And they mostly covered up that incredibly in the scene boom mic. And they wouldn't have bothered to do that in some other movies, or they just would have cropped the shot closer. But clearly, they're like, no, this is the setup for this shot. I need them to be here. And so instead of going the super easy route, they went with a little bit harder route. And that to me it told me, oh yeah, that's why this is better than those other movies. They cared about it. And I think that's, it's worth commending. I'm gonna get us towards a wrap up here, but I do want to mention that there is a sequel to THANKSKILLING. It is not THANKSKILLING 2. It is actually THANKSKILLING 3. And it is
random and zany.
Yeah. It is there's a quest to recover the lost copy of THANKSKILLING 2. That is a key component of the plot of THANKSKILLING 3, which came out 3 years later from this film, so 2012. And
it's not in space, so
well, there is a scene in space. So I will.
Oh.
I will hold on that. I would love for us to tackle this at another time. And I want to also just give a note that Wanda Lust also is in THANKSKILLING 3. So, moving right along, Tad, who would you recommend Thanksgiving to and why?
This is, considering the age this came out in, this is a great movie for those who missed the college humor era of the internet, because didn't this movie have a YouTube release?
It had it might have had a MySpace release.
MySpace.
Well, no. So it had a MySpace account, but it was probably it might have been released on YouTube, now that I think about it. But anyway, it started with a MySpace account. So it's been in production for a while, most likely.
Yeah, this is a movie that I feel is kind of, this movie actually, to me, kind of represents the end of that decade, because things started to drastically shift in the next few years after 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012. Everything's like, a lot of media started shifting, and this movie is kind of like a leftover of that beautiful era between 2006 to 2009, and maybe a little of 2010, where it was still kind of the old Wild West and the
Channel 101 era kind of thing.
Yeah, a lot of the internet was still full of stuff like this, but this just happens to be one of the higher budget pieces. Like, a lot of it was, you know, You're the Man Now, Dog, and early YouTube and ridiculous, stupid junk. And this is like, if you enjoy the nostalgia of that era, this is a perfect piece for that.
And now that I think about it, I think you're right on that front. And of course, that era of humor and the internet was really an outcropping of the same groupthink of individuals that just wanted to create something with this new media that the rental store, the VHS camcorder era, shot on video, you know, started. It didn't really start. I'm sure there was something before that. There were zines before that. So it all feeds into that. And I agree. I think it sits firmly in that do-it-yourself entertainment category where it actually succeeds. And I hadn't thought of that, but Channel 101, if anybody doesn't know what that is, go to channel101.com and check it out. It's a playground for people to make sort of 5-minute pilots of things. And there is some insane garbage and some brilliant trash on there. It is Will Ferrell, I believe, supported it for a long time, if not founded it. There's a lot of weird stories. I haven't looked into it too much, but it is a passion of mine. So check that out, guys. That was fun stuff. Greg, who would you recommend Thanksgiving to and why?
I mean, if you liked what we had to say about Ginger Dead Man, if you like Santa's Sleigh, if you're just a fan of kind of holiday parody horror films, I'd say give this a whirl. I definitely won't recommend it to everyone, but I will recommend it to kind of the cult horror crowd, because I mean, it's funny, it's short enough that you can just dismount it, and I had fun.
All right, fair enough. And I'm just going to say, I think this is the only time, Greg, that you've been on this show where you have actually recommended and it sounds like enjoyed both of my selections. So
yeah, I mean,
I'm losing my edge, I guess.
It's a new era. I'm sure next time I'm on, I'll come in haggard, drunk, and just spew forth a lot of hate.
Oh, well, then I guess Tad doesn't have to be here. Jeffrey Tucker, my friend, who would you recommend?
Oh, come on. This movie is clearly for people who can't wait 3 seconds for tits. That's who it's for. No, honestly, I mean, this, if you're easily offended, don't go see this. If you don't like that kind of comedy that's not like jokes and funny things, but just like awkward and weird and stilted and just random, you know, that's what this is. I mean, it's not the best version of it, but it's totally passable. And you know, like Nate said earlier on, there's not enough Thanksgiving themed movies, so you know.
Totally true. I mean, there was a Bob's Burgers episode where the beeline was that there were no Thanksgiving songs, and that's true. And it is also true that there are virtually no Thanksgiving films. So having this on the roster of things that we can watch, you know, Christmas has plenty. You know, if nothing else, Nightmare Before Christmas, Halloween, of course, has a million. You know, who doesn't watch Hocus Pocus or something along those lines? But Thanksgiving does not have much, and so I really think the makers and the cast of Thanksgiving, and of course Turkey, who I don't have a golden altar of in my closet and worship as my Lord. I don't know. I'm not gonna fess up to that. I really appreciate it, and I'm glad that it's a part of our new lexicon of weird holiday movies. I'm gonna recommend this film to people who like South Park and are now inured to its insanity and its incredibly occasionally horrifying humor, that they can tolerate something that's not quite as witty, but almost just as filthy sometimes. So, I mean, at its peak, I think South Park can be a little more filthy because it also has sort of righteous satire behind it that makes it sting a little because it's true about our society. THANKSKILLING doesn't have that. But if you like the South Park humor and you're okay with both aspects of it, the really smart humor that South Park has meshed with the totally vile, ridiculous gutter humor that it has, you're going to enjoy THANKSKILLING. And again, it's an hour and 6 minutes. You've wasted more of your life standing in line for something. So give it a go.
And more of your life listening to this podcast, honestly.
Sure. This is you could have watched THANKSKILLING. Sorry about it. Yeah, so that's it for this episode. To play us off, as always, we have All About Evil by Friends the Chud. I want to once again mention our Patreon at patreon.com/cultandclassicpodcast. You can pay as little as $1 a month to get access to videos of all of us for these episodes. Plus, there will be some bonus episodes in the future. You can pay $5 and get an autographed, custom Cult and Classic trading card. These are legit trading cards that you can't get anywhere else but from us. And if you want to pay $10 and really drink the Kool-Aid, you get a zine every month, the card, the access, and cool swag. So check it out. Once again, I've talked over the length of our outro music, but I'm going to just say thank you guys. Keep listening and follow us at cultandclassic.com. No, don't do that. Follow us at cultandclassicpodcast.com. And if you own cultandclassic.com, reach out to me because you stole our domain name. Thank you so much.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to Cult and Classic Podcast. This podcast is important to me, but what's more important are the rights, privileges, and freedom from violence of everyone in this country and in this world. And that means supporting Black Lives Matter. If you'd like to make a donation, please go ahead and visit cultandclassicpodcast.com, where we have a list of places you can donate and help out. And please stay safe.